We'll go ahead and call the meeting into order. Are you ready, ma'am?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh.
About to take it. I don't think
Presiding Officer, Major David Dixon.
Here.
Assistant Presiding Officer, Constable Bobby Rachel.
Here.
Professor Patrick Boone.
Here.
Sergeant Joshua Fisher.
Here.
Officer Eduardo Garza.
Here.
Sheriff Eugene Bodie Hillhouse.
Here.
Officer Ramiro Montoya.
Here.
James Pat Ober.
Here.
Detective David Schreiber.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Did everybody get a chance to look over the minutes? Yes. So are we good to go ahead and approve them?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as published.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
So you're better at this than I am. Oh. All right, so everybody met in their subcommittees, correct? Sure. All right, so let's go through the subcommittees. Pat, do you want to go over yours first? Pat. Oh, Burke, sorry.
Yeah.
just staring right at you.
We met and submitted a draft of a description for the schools that mirrors the APA's current policy. I believe the attorneys we met with have a copy of that.
We do have a copy of that. However, I think it's going to be much simpler when we put in the rule. It similar to when TDLR had it, their statute said if it's if the training is provided by someone that the agency approves. And so I think we'll just say that as long as you have the, I think the ultimate recommendation is that training must come from an APA accredited course in order to get the certificate.
That's correct.
So the only thing I wanted to add to that is APA and or AAPP.
The APA doesn't accredit. All they do is recognize. We would have to look at language changes if you wanted to do that.
I think there's is there a reason the and or?
So for DPS, we had 4 years where we were not APA accredited. So we'd have 70 people that wouldn't.
This is only going
This is
forward.
perspective.
So, but there's always that chance, right? And so AAT goal is for commissioned police officers, right? And AAPP is for police officers, whereas APA is for the private sector.
Mhm.
So I think if we're following both in the language for AAPP, all their language mirrors APA. So we're not missing anything. All we're doing is making sure we're double covered with accreditations. You understand what I'm saying?
And I think that AAPP does have language where it does, it may not, it's an approved AAPP course or training.
Mhm.
And so we'll talk a little bit later about that, but I do think that that's an important factor to be included.
Okay.
So the biggest thing is for APA, for the school, you have to have a bachelor's degree. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And so for AAPP, you don't need that. For
To get in,
no, to actually run the school.
to run.
And so for us, for peace officers, we don't need a bachelor's degree. So we're holding people, and I understand polygraph examiners want to be held to a higher standard, but that's my issue though. It's not all law enforcement have to have a bachelor's degree, but some law enforcement officers or polygraph examiners are great polygraph examiners without a bachelor's degree. So they should be able to teach. That's the biggest difference right there between APA and AAPP.
Mm-hmm.
Is anyone who's an instructor in an APA has to have a degree, or just the whoever is running that training program?
As a school director, anyone that instructs has to have, for APA, has to have at least 2 years as a polygraph examiner, 200 exams, and have a bachelor's degree. Otherwise, someone else has to be there present with the degree.
So that's the big difference. And that would affect us as at our school. So she's our school director, and she has to be in the classroom when some of my other examiners talk, because they teach, because they don't have degrees. So now, and like I said, we had 3 to 4 years where we weren't APA accredited, but we still filed everything through TCOL and we were accredited through AAPP. So all I'm adding is just that or AAPP, APA or AAPP.
So the language be accredited by APA or recognized by AAPP.
Yes.
That would be the language that would work. Was you'd have to say recognition of the curriculum from AAPP.
Recognition of.
Yeah.
Approved curriculum, right.
The reality is there aren't 200 training providers and we're going to miss one.
Yeah.
There is a handful, and we'll be clear on which one of those two they meet.
And so the reason I'm making this an issue is if Michelle left, the school director for DPS left, we would be out of APA compliance here. Because that's how many don't have bachelor's degrees that work for us. So that's the worry. I still want to make sure that in Texas we can operate. We may not be APA member.
Does that mean?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If I could offer something, I thought that this was going to come up underneath a grandfather clause. And rather than complicating the language, what if you had a curriculum that substantially meets the APA standard? Because we all know what the issue is whether or not the instructor themselves had a degree. Will that suffice going forward for this concern of who's in this exceptional group who may not have been APA accredited?
I think my concern, and Cullen might be able to speak to this better than I can, but is then you open the door where someone tries to set up a shop and now we're comparing curriculums and making that decision. If APA and AAPP are making it and all of you trust those two organizations and the way they operate, then I would prefer, because like we talked about, as their standards evolve, their number of hours evolve, everything stays with that and we're just measuring it against that. If we create substantially similar, now we're responsible for coming in and comparing those, and I'm not sure we're as qualified as the people that run APA and AAPP.
I understand.
Yeah, I would agree. If we can slave this to something that someone else maintains as the environment changes, then I think it's easier on us. I mean, it would be a preference for us rather than trying to import some level of subject matter expertise. So we're looking at individual curricula for a yes or a no, from TCOL. We would rather, if both organizations are acceptable, if the language is subtly different, one calls it an accreditation, one calls it something else, I think we can get language that would accommodate both or either.
I just want, Pat, I'm trying to put it in there in case DPS ever happens again where we're not under APA. But again, this is a TCOL rule, and AAPP applies more for police officers. So that's also why I think we should not mirror, but follow their accreditation.
Well, but my problem is the AAPP doesn't accredit.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I keep using the wrong word, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, as long as we mirror their language, then
Yeah.
I'm not objecting to it. I just want to make sure we get the language correct.
Yeah.
So is it approved or is it recognized?
Approved.
Approved?
Yeah.
So approved by the AAPP?
Yes, sir.
Yes. APA or AAPP.
Well, I think would we say accredited by APA or approved by AAPP? Is that a more
I
accurate?
believe the technical language is recognition from AAPP.
And we can figure that out, whether it's approved or recognized.
Recognized and approved.
Yeah.
So how would you prefer to handle this? And maybe Aaron can advise us, but I mean, you could certainly make a motion to adopt the subcommittee's recommendations, or we could just draft the actual language of the rule, right? And then they could vote on it then.
Yeah, it's probably best if they see the final product first. And so instead of, I guess, voting on these piecemeal as we go through, see a final product and just kind of approve that at the end. It's probably the best course to take. It'll be the cleanest course to take.
And then
Because if we approve something now and we see something else later, it's like, oh, there's an error. We need to go back and undo what we approved before. It'll just be cleaner for the whole process. If that's okay with
I'm
you.
good with that.
yeah, and we can make one set of recommendations at the end
That's right.
and vote.
Mhm.
Okay. I agree with that.
So then for curriculum and testing, we would fall under that AAPA or AAPP, so we wouldn't have to worry about any verbiage for that. Am I correct?
I think that's what we understood the group recommended, is that the curriculum would be either accredited or recognized, and then that they would use their testing process. And once they've completed that course and that test, then they would qualify for the certificate. And this is everybody going forward, all the new ones issued.
So then that also covers training providers. So then it would be on to your committee, which was continuing education.
Yes. And we met, you want to,
Real quick, do both of them, APA and AAPP, have testing after the course? Like you have to pass some sort of,
So
No,
APA requires a comprehensive exam at the end of the course after the 10 weeks.
okay. What about AAPP?
It just recognizes the APA standard.
It's 3 throughout and then 1 at the
3
final.
exams during the course at minimum and then a comprehensive at the end.
They're very similar.
and then they work hand in glove at the end of it.
Okay.
Aaron, do you want to go over our continuing ed?
If they obtain that training out of state, does that create a unique reporting requirement that we need to contemplate? So we need to think of this 2 ways, right? The easy one is the licensed peace officers who are taking the course in Texas, but we're also going to offer the certificate, or possibly offer a certificate to people who aren't licensed, right? And then there's the potential that you can take training out of state. So what most of us are familiar with is you return to your agency, you report your training through your agency, but we need to make sure that we account for all the possible ways, right? So in other words, if somebody went to another state and took APA training, how can they come back and report that to get the certificate here? Or do we want to recognize out-of-state training?
I think you would still have to submit your APA certification.
For training?
Yes, so there's, I want to say on each website, they have about 12 to 10 or 10 to 12 different schools that you can go through across the state that meet those requirements. So and so you get your certificate that says it's from APA and you submit it to all. Would that suffice?
I mean, as long as the schools are run significantly the same, in other words, the testing she talked about, if that's the norm, everybody's test to the same standard, and it shouldn't be problematic. It would be part of the application process, because this one's going to require an application that would come through our credentialing group. And so they would, presumably give up their certificate. We might have to do a little research on the school. Or we would maintain a list of those schools that are approved.
Couldn't they just submit their membership with APA or AAPP to y'all to help y'all? Because it's not just.
Right, we're just, this is not how we're set up to
Yeah,
accept training
sure.
normally, right? So I'm just trying to think through, if we can work on the logistics of that, I just want to make sure that you want to accept, if it's APA accredited, it doesn't matter where in the country it's taught.
Correct.
You're willing to accept that,
Yes.
right? So if they sent someone to Alabama to take the training and they came back, we might have to have a different process for reporting that, but it should award the certificate either way.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Both the APA and the AAPP website have a running list of approved schools that are recognized by them.
Okay. So it would be easy for us to confirm that. We just have to create the mechanism for reporting.
And then it's not gonna be a high volume.
No.
Do you have something else?
No, I was just gonna say, they have a list of who attends their conferences. It's on there. It's available. If a peace officer in Mississippi moves to Texas and he was an examiner out there, went to a school out there and comes here, I think, like you said, those are few and far between, but as long as, you know, most agencies are going to be the same. They're not going to accept someone to work there that doesn't go to a professional training conference.
Well, and, you know, it's a proficiency certificate, so we have right of refusal. If somebody shows up and they can't prove their training credentials or we're gonna ask them to prove up training from the training provider, not just, hey, I'm a member of the association and that's automatic. So they're gonna have to give up, you know, something from the school that says they completed this training, you know, process and examination before we issue the certificate. So it won't just, so if by somehow they defrauded one of the associations to get the membership, we're hoping that we would catch that by making them prove up. We may or may not. We reserve the right to contact the school and make sure they're a graduate of the school. But I think we can manage the out of state. A lot of them are going to come, or at least the perception was, a lot of them will be federal. They're coming out of one of the alphabet, and maybe not coming as peace officers. They want to come and do this job. And so it's that, you know, people that were working in military intelligence or in one of the other, you know, federal facets that uses polygraphs, I think you're going to have an interest there.
You want to go over, continue in?
Sure.
Can I ask one more question real quick? How many providers provide that 10-week course in Texas? Do we know roughly? I think somebody said 5 or 6, I think.
No, it should just be 2.
Just 2.
Three. It's
Three.
three.
Oh, Savinos, okay. So
And DPS is can report directly to TCOL. Can the other 2 report directly, or do they have?
that's one of them.
There's 3 schools. One of them is in Dallas. I have one, and Texas DPS has one.
DPS be the only one.
Chief Engineer, I think the answer to that was that the others cannot report directly into the TCOL system. I think that was the question. Ready for continuing ed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Regarding the continuing ed, we met and discussed. Our recommendation is for 30 hours of continuing ed every 2-year unit with at least one training conference at the Texas Association of Law Enforcement Polygraph Investigators Conference, American Polygraph Association, American Association of Police Polygraphists, or the National Polygraph Association. One of those conferences must attend during that 2-year unit.
Didn't you want to see at least 16 hours coming from the conference? So you could do it all at 1, or you could do it at 2, but at least 16 of your 30 hours every training unit has to come from the conference.
Correct.
Yes.
And we would sync it up with the TCOL's training units for our licensees. So it would start the first full training unit after your certification, which would be the next training unit starts August or September 1st, 2027.
So that's 14 hours that sort of, what's the 14 hours in?
Well, they had talked about building a list of coursework that's acceptable, like types of courses. And I think in particular, what y'all looked at was the courses that make up that 10 weeks, right? Of being able to break out similar classes so you could take those. I think somebody had also mentioned the sex offender interview training that's not part of that, that would be beneficial. But that we would do like we do in some of our other ones where courses approved by TCOL, and then you would go to the website and there would be a list of 15 to 20 classes that you could take and they would be broken down.
So that's a burden on y'all for every examiner every 2 years to make sure that they're getting their 30 hours.
So we're automating a lot of that now. And so the way that system should is we're creating the ability for agencies to designate assignments, and anybody who has that assignment, and in this case, anybody who has a certificate, when they log into their MyTCOL and they go to their My Compliance page, it would tell them how many hours they had to have and what courses were acceptable for that. So they probably wouldn't get individualized notifications like we do for regular training compliance, because we're not going to take license action. I think what we had discussed is if you fail to complete the hours, your certificate expires. But as soon as you complete the deficient training, then it would be reactivated essentially through the end of that next training unit. So for example, if you didn't get 4 hours, you realize on September 1st, you complete on September 15th, it reactivates, and then you still are due by the next 2 years by the August 31st, if that makes sense. The one question I had about that we didn't discuss and I thought of later is there a point where if it's been expired for a period of time that you want it to go inactive? In other words, if somebody didn't do anything for 20 years, didn't do any training, and then they just did their 30 hours, do you want theirs to come back on and they can go right back to work as a polygraph examiner? Or do you want to say after 8 years or 10 years that if it's been expired for 8 years, it goes inactive and you would have to start over? You'd have to do the full 10-week course in order to get the certificate back.
And when we're saying inactive, meaning they moved to another state, worked there for 10 years, and then decide to come back and start all over again and
You
want
let
to
your training compliance here lapse. So you could go to another state as long as you kept doing the training and reporting it, it would stay active, right? It's just if you didn't do any training for an extended period of time, are you going to require them to start all over, or do they just do that 30 hours and they're back on?
What is it for a regular peace officer? Like,
It depends. We got like a whole chart.
It's
like
complicated.
It's the government. Like we don't make it easy.
I do A, B, C, and D.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
So,
It depends
it's
on how long you've had been appointed. How
If
long
you've
it's
been
been since
full-time
that
for more than
appointment.
10 years, then basically you get to where you just do the current unit training and you're caught up.
Mhm.
But a lot of them, that's the other thing is now you got to weigh more factors in. How long, how many exams did they do?
They're upon the completion of 30 hours.
I mean, I tend to think that if someone leaves as a peace officer in Texas and goes to another state and goes to work and does work there and doesn't report anything down here, they have a license in their state, whatever, and then they decide to move back at retirement or whatever and be a peace officer again down here. I think that as long as, like you said, there's a continuum of service, so to speak, or something that shows that they're just not off the grid, that, you know, we would take that 30 hours and let them back in the house.
Yeah, I think the person leaving Texas and going out of state and continuing to practice is less likely than the person in Texas who was a polygraph operator, gets elected sheriff, gets chief or whatever, and quits doing their continuing ed. You know, if they pick up and go to Mississippi and continue to do it, they'll be able to prove some continuing ed, some attending conferences, all of that. When they move back to Texas, that becomes their burden of proof for us to reactivate. What I think we're going to see more of is somebody who's no longer a ranger. They're promoted up into admin, whatever it is, and they do nothing with it for 5 years, 10 years, and then all of a sudden they're going to retire. They see this as an avenue where they could go back to potentially making money. And so it's that group that has failed to maintain, failed to maintain their continuing ed, done no tests, been to no conferences. Is there a period after which that group should have to start from scratch, or something short of they could do their 30 and restart, or do they do 100 hours and restart? I think that's kind of the question.
I think 10 years, if you're not doing any continual education, you're not running charts for 10 years, it needs to go inactive. Because you've missed so much. If that makes sense.
Is, in your opinion, everyone's opinion, is 10 years that number should be shorter?
I would opt for 5.
Five, I agree with 5 also.
I think when you start looking at the way things have changed, just in the years that Bobby and I have, back then, it's changed a lot. If we wouldn't have gone to any of that continuing education, we'd be so far off on the way things are being taught now. But yeah, I think 5 would be a good number.
Let's do 4 or 6.
Yeah.
We're doing your training units, so.
And okay, let's do 4.
Four.
To keep it in the cycle,
So
or keep it in the, yeah.
if you haven't completed it for 2 consecutive units, then?
I would say if you haven't done it for 2 units, then you need to get the 60 hours of training that you missed during those 2 2-year units back up. And you're going to have to do that at one of the aforementioned continuing ed groups. That's what I think. Anybody else?
I agree with Bobby.
To go back in your whole scenario though, right? So a polygraph examiner for DPS goes and he's a ranger, and then he leaves, he retires from DPS and he wants to be an examiner again. He's not going to fall into TCOL because he's going to go in the private sector.
That's going to fall under my section about,
If they want to operate if they want to do something for which this certificate is required, they will have to come to TCOL to get the certificate.
I think they could do,
That's kind of one of the other subcommittees as well, though, right?
yes.
A little bit of their,
Okay.
So Chick, is it possible that someone maintains their certification here, but they're a peace officer in a different state? Is that going to be cumbersome?
well, let's think about it this way. So yes and no. So the simple thing here is if you're not appointed, you don't have to be appointed. You can maintain your peace officer license. I've got a guy who for more than 20 years kept his license, wasn't appointed, where he just kept doing his continuing ed. You can do that anywhere in the world. So you could, in theory, do the same as a polygraph examiner.
Okay.
But it sounds like what y'all are saying essentially, and especially when you start talking about 4 years, is you're just going to have to be able to show that you're going to have to catch up what you're due. So you can't go 6 years without and then just do the last 30 and be caught up, but you could do the 60 that you've missed over those periods and get caught up. And I think in that case, if you've been in Louisiana working and you can document your training, you can probably apply those hours towards it. So you may not even have hours. You're just gonna have to prove that you've had at least 60 hours of training during those 3 training units or during those 2 training units that you missed. Is that?
Yeah, it does. And that approval would be similar to a move-in that was an examiner, that vetting process, correct?
We're back to where you're going to have to send in an application. You have to send it in and review it. It's not as simple as we're automatically going to search your PSR and apply the action, right? There's 2 ways that we can do certificates. The school-based law enforcement, now you get the 2 classes done, it shows up on your PSR and the award date is the day you completed the 2nd class. Like I like making them automatic and simple. What you're building is probably not. You're going to have to do an application, mail in a check for $35 and get it. The renewals and the continuation will be, but not that initial one. And then especially if you've missed a period of time, during that first 2 years, you just do the class, you get caught up, it renews or removes that expiration, right? But if you go more than 1 full training unit, now you're going to have to reapply and establish that you've completed all the training. Does that kind of get you where you want to be? And then if you've missed 10 years, now you're talking, 5 times 30, so 150 hours to get caught up.
But if you're looking at it globally, you can go to an AAPP or an APA conference. You can go 2 of those in 1 year and have 80 hours if you wanted it.
Or you may have been doing some training. There may be
Right.
some interview and interrogation training that you were doing that will count towards that, or some ethics training that would count towards that, right? So I think most of them will incorporate some of that training in their other continuing ed obligations anyway. Okay. You think you can do that?
Very good. Are y'all good?
So,
Agree on board?
So you ready to talk about eligibility?
Yes, so Bodie, Sheriff and I, when we presented to y'all, was basically one group it's excluding, the way the law is written is private examiners who work for agencies. Like the ask was before, how many? I couldn't tell you. I kind of fall into that because I'm a retired peace officer, but I do a lot of work for many agencies, you know, and if they're going to go with, you know, having the peace officer certified, potentially could exclude me unless I want to get, I guess, commission with an agency, which wouldn't be a problem. I keep up with my training and so forth. But there's a lot of examiners out there that don't fall in that peace officer category. Federal examiners that have retired. I know several that work in the Houston area that are retired federal examiners that do a lot of work for agencies. There's private examiners who used to be CPS, social workers and so forth that got their polygraph license and are now doing exams for agencies as well. So I think we need to look at those as well. Like we were talking, I think Aaron, you said brought up the PIO or TJ about the PIO certification for agencies because a lot of those are civilians as well. So create something where we can track those and allow them to also still work for those agencies who are going to follow this rule, this law.
No, I do.
That was good.
So again, that creates unique logistical requirements for us. I already talked to our chief information officer because right now our public license lookup allows you to see licensees, but I don't think it allows you to see anyone who has a certificate but doesn't have a license. So like we have probation officers that get a firearm certificate. They have a record with us, but they don't have a license. But I don't believe you can look those up in the public license lookup. And this is a group we would want to be accessible there.
Yes.
So I have them researching what that would look like. And then there's the additional challenge of how they report their training if they're not directly associated with an agency. So if they are, even as a civilian, if they're attached to an agency and that agency has them as a non-licensed person in TCLADS, they can report training for them. But if they're not associated with it, there wouldn't be a mechanism for them to report that directly, especially if they took it from one of the training providers who doesn't have a training contract with us. So we can structure the rule like you said. We just got to figure out how to make that actually happen.
Sure.
If they have a certification, do they get a PID number?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they would have to have a PID number to get a certification.
yeah.
Chicken egg.
So if they came hypothetically to our Texas Law Enforcement Polygraph Conference and they sign in, do the roster and all that stuff, just like every other peace officer does that's in the room, would that suffice?
So long as the training is, so long as the conference is reported by somebody, like if DPS is reporting the conference.
Right.
Then anybody with a PID number can sign on. We have a handful of certificates, basic instructor, advanced instructor. We have a lot of people who are not our licensees, but they want to teach, or justices of the peace can get the mental health officer certificate. They all have PID numbers when they apply for that certificate. So as long as they go to a training provider who's a direct reporting entity, they have a contract with us to train, then yes, they can use their PID number, sign in just like the peace officers, jailers, and telecommunicators do, and it'll be reported to us. It'll hit their account, and kind of the evergreen system TJ's talking about, it will auto renew as long as the system sees that, as long as our system's looking for it and sees it. It'll auto renew, and it will show the lapse if they're not.
But if you can't make the Texas conference and you go to the one in Louisiana, normally now you bring your certificate back and your agency reports the training for you.
Right.
If you're not associated with an agency, you can't do that. You can only go to training that's put on by the contract providers that can report directly.
So they could not necessarily self-submit.
We don't have individual self-submit systems.
I guess they just need to stay in Texas and go to the conference.
Texas law.
That would simplify that.
If they're associated with an agency, they will have a mechanism to do that. It's only going to be during the time that they're not.
What issues do y'all see with where we're at right now?
No, I'll let Aaron add. I think we're pretty clear on your 4 subcommittees and where you are. And I think even more so now, I think we can start to draft the rules so you can look at the wording and find the outliers that don't fit. I think the next big piece is how do we deal? This is everybody going forward. How do we determine who gets a certificate right now based on existing? The grandfather group.
Did you have something here?
No, I just,
That's what we discussed earlier. I don't know if you want to work on that as, if you want to have, break more subcommittees and work on that. I think the subcommittees were all really productive and worked pretty quickly. But I think that's the next big step. And it may be that you want to break it into chunks too. It may be similar to this. Who's going to be eligible for it? How far back are we going to go? And what training are we look at? You might want to break it into groups. I don't know, but I think we have a good handle on what you want to do on some date going forward, what's going to be required to get that certificate. And we just got to figure out that other group.
So maybe a criteria for the grandfathering is really the last question of the component.
And I think there are going to be layers to that too, right? Because what I would like to see ideally is you tell me who all those people are and we give them all a certificate on August 31st and we're done with it. But certainly there's a possibility 2 years from now, somebody's going to want to apply who either did the training 7 years ago or that we're not going to get all of them initially. So I think you're going to have to create a standard that we can recognize over a period of time.
So, could we do it like this easy that they have to prove, and this is sort of what we talked about during my committee meeting with you, or subcommittee meeting, that they prove their membership with either AAPP or APA, and they also prove to y'all that they've had how many hours in 30 hours in 2 years. Those being the 2 requirements. Is that too general? I'm just thinking of a starting point.
Well, y'all get to determine what they are. It's just whether or not I can execute it. I mean, that's what this group is for.
So,
If that's what the group thinks needs to happen, then we just got to figure out how we can capture that.
I have a quick question on it starts to bug me when we talk about a membership to an association as a measurement as to whether they get something from the state of Texas. Because associations are not a function of the government. They make money off of their memberships. And so we're slaving a state process to membership. So if we stick with the approved schools, approved curriculums, as the burden of proof, not membership. You can't show up with a membership card that says I paid my dues to get something from the state. That would be abnormal most of the time. Normally it's I graduated this school and that's recognized, or so I'm reluctant when I hear membership to things. Because state processes generally shouldn't drive membership. But like we don't get the Chiefs to go join the Chiefs Association to get something from the state. And so
Just looking at courses recognized and approved.
Yeah, it goes back to the notion of accreditation, or we can go to those associations because of their knowledge base or accreditation content, those kind of things. But I'm reluctant to tie membership to getting the certificate.
So seeing as we have time, I just figured are y'all good discussing this now?
Yes. Yes.
So how about we start with any persons who's attended the defined training providers by the subchapter and has received their 30 hours of training within the last 2 years. Could it be that simple?
So, yes, I think what we'll do, so here's what we're doing with the PIO, just to give you some measuring stick. Those are FEMA-based courses. We're working with TDM, but they've made the argument, if you've ever gone through that initial licensing course, we don't think you should repeat it. We want you to do continuing ed. So what we're going to do is probably on August 31st of this year, everybody who's ever completed that licensing course will get that certificate. They then, that by statute, they're required to do continuing ed every year, right? So they'll have to do it every year, but it will start, the continuing ed application will start on award of the certificate. So if you create the criteria to award those certificates, then I don't know that you need the 30 hours. Whatever training you're saying is an obligation to get the certificate, once they've fulfilled that, they'll get it. And then whatever that award date is, the next full training unit will start their continuing ed compliance. Does that make sense? I wouldn't require that on the front end. It's going to be confusing.
I do think it's important, though, that there's not a gap. Like they went to polygraph school 20 years ago. They're now applying for, you know what I'm saying? And they haven't done anything in that window of time.
I get it. But do you really think they're going to do any training in the next 2 years, or is it just going to expire? Like if you say anybody who did this school and has it on their PSR gets a certificate and we award that, and they haven't done anything in 20 years, theirs is going to expire in the next training unit. They're not going to do the continuing ed that they haven't been doing. But it allows everyone to start on equal footing, if that makes sense. It's going to be difficult, I think, to reconstruct all of their continuing ed between the time they took that licensing course and now.
So what would it look like for me? What would I have to submit? Is just a certificate from our school, or?
I don't know what your PSR looks like. That's one of the things we got to look at is I don't know that they're all going to be identifiable.
Yes, because again, a civilian that went to a school maybe in Pennsylvania or through the federal government as a federal agent, they would have to submit something, I'm assuming to y'all, showing I completed this required training to become a polygraph examiner.
How many people do we think we're talking about?
I'd say it's a handful. Again, when we lost the licensing, it would have been easier to tell you back then, but I couldn't tell you. I know that, at our conferences, Bobby, what about?
Do you know how many went to the last conference?
We have about 100
Yeah, but how many of those were
feds.
non-peace officers and former feds? 'Cause there's a handful like
Yeah, but we report TCOL
right.
from our conference, so
How many of those on that list
probably a third.
that are
So Chief-
fall into the category of peace officer?
I'm sure Pat does the same thing, and I think he's got a question, but I know DPS has a roster of every single person that's attended every one of their schools. So the vetting, just like when we apply, I know membership's not the word you want this, but when we apply for membership for AAPP, we have to submit a document that says we graduated from a school. They have to be able to call that school and verify that you did attend, pass, so on and so forth, before we get that little membership card. So that is something that I don't think that would be hard for those that attended, because they've got to keep those rosters.
So maybe we need to back up and address Cullen's concern, because we actually did it anyway, right? We're requiring conference hours. You got to be a member to go to the conference. And we had that discussion about where else could you get that training, and y'all felt like you couldn't. But if Cullen, would it solve your problem if they could use their APA or AAP membership as proof, because those agencies already verified it, or they could establish it independently? We're not requiring them to be a member, but that is one method of proof that they can provide.
APA doesn't require.
Yeah, I think so. So I guess the counter question is, can I get this certificate from the state of Texas without being a member of APA or AAPP?
Pat, I can discuss that.
So yeah, I had a question, one of which is, I didn't want to mess this up, but when we originally wrote who can do the training, we tied it to 400 hours. If they're an examiner older, and my memory's not as good as it was, but probably 2014, somewhere around in there, the requirements changed. So You could also be looking at examiners who went through school whenever the requirement was 320 and potentially even less than that. And so just for the people who are writing the language, we tried to write in language that it would have been approved or recognized at the time that the person attended the school. As far as the continuing education, I know that the AAPP and APA both, and I'm not wanting to speak for them, but they have shown a tendency to not want to be responsible for having to demonstrate a non-member went through continuing education. So
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know what
I'm not
that does for the
advocating, I'm not
discussion.
advocating for that.
Okay,
So to make sure that I understand, if someone is an APA member or an AAP member, you would believe that they had the required base level training.
So we get phone calls. Like,
yes,
like, let's say somebody graduated 3 years ago and now they're applying for APP. We will get phone calls asking if they've come through our school.
Okay, and if they have verified them and give them the membership, that's enough for me to give them a certificate in your eyes.
yes.
And they do the same with us. When they apply to come to a conference and we don't know who they are, we ask them to make sure that they do meet the minimum standards that we're talking about here for membership into our organization as a peace officer, as a citizen, as a private examiner. We verify that so that we can submit the training accordingly.
So if there's 3 ways to establish that you are in the grandfather group, that you're already there. One of them is you have a current APA membership. One of them is you have a current AAPP membership, right? And you're okay with both of those?
Yes.
You're confident those have been vetted, that we could issue a certificate based on that alone. And then the third one, to Cullen's point, is if you haven't been paid dues or you don't want to, but you can establish that you went through the school and we have another mechanism where you can show that in an application, then that it's the same thing. You're gonna have to show you did the training. We're gonna vet it directly instead of trusting APA or AAPP. Is that?
I think you could just simplify it too, though. I with what you're saying, it's just that they went to what we had defined as a training provider. That they have previously received a certificate from somebody identified as a training provider, because then that's gonna.
Well, that gets harder for the staff that I have, though,
Okay.
to call Florida and verify the school and do all that. If APA has already done the work, I'd prefer to just use the
Okay.
APA membership, right?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I just didn't think you were. So yeah.
And you can add our association in there as well, that if for membership into our association, they're going to have that as well. So you've got really 3 different places you could check to make sure that if necessary.
What are those 3 places again?
APA, AAPP, or the state association.
Which that'll also help you with out-of-state people, because then they may be able to file their, well, it'll help with out-of-state people because they have APA or AAPP.
So I guess my question is there a way to get to the initial certificate without being a member, either of those 3 associations? And is there a way for me to complete my continuing ed and keep my certificate going without being a member of those 3 associations?
You cannot attend one of their conferences, Telepi, APA, or AAPP, without being a member, because that's part of the registration fees.
See,
Say that
No, no,
again,
you
Bobby?
can attend APA without being.
Oh, that's right.
You can pay
That's
it.
I'm sorry.
not-
There is a you're right, you're right.
And I'm really not trying to play the devil, but we've run into this with the Sheriff's Association wants, all sheriffs to be members. And they, and it's less likely with sheriffs. They're actually a cohesive group. We have chiefs of police who will not join either IACP and or Texas Police Chiefs Association. And so if we slave something to association membership to include their conference, because most places, Like if you want to go to IACP, you end up buying a IACP membership. I don't think you have to, but they make it, basically make it part of your.
The conference itself,
Yeah,
you have to be a member.
okay, yeah, so.
Well, I think we're good with putting that if you're not one of those three, you're submitting your certificate. Plus, I think like if I go to an out of state or some other training, I got to prove to y'all, they have to have a lesson plan or something. They should have to do the legwork, not y'all.
And did you say you could attend APA and not be a member? Is
Yes,
that correct?
yeah.
Yeah, they do have, they charge like an extra $100 if you're a non-member attending. They make, and they try to make it cost prohibitive, but yeah, there is an avenue.
Because one of the things that has been tried in the past is either legislation, one of the things that the legislature has attempted a couple of times, has died each time to require agencies to get accreditation. Well, accreditation at the agency level, Texas is owned by the Texas Police Chiefs Association Foundation. And, so the sheriffs walked in and went, oh, I know, but hell no, police chiefs should not be telling us. And again, it's not, a lot of them do it because it's an option. Sheriff's Association is looking at accreditation unique to Sheriff's Department. But that's one of the stumbling blocks is they're tying things to membership in private organizations to get to a state benefit or a state get something from the state. And so that's the only thing that I would caution against. As long as there is a path where I go to an approved school, I can get my continuing ed and I can get this certificate from the state of Texas. And I'm just not a joiner. I just don't like associations. There's going to be one or more people that want that path. And so if I have access to all the training I need, then I'm good with it. And I think that you guys have the flexibility to make that. I'm just bringing it up as food for thought. Because we've run into it in some other areas before. Whether it's a Chiefs Association, Sheriff's Association, Constables Association, being the sole source of something that they only give to members. So that's my only caution. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I didn't think about that when we were talking about it the other day.
But I think I mentioned this, some of the subcommittees, like I've been in law enforcement 30 years and complaining is a sport for cops. Like there is going to be complaints no matter what you do. We have to understand that. And what you're doing is several times removed from what Colin's talking about. We're not preventing an agency. It's not agency accreditation. You don't have to have a certificate unless you're going to do a few of these things. So, it's a small group. It's a small requirement. If they have a membership in order to get their conference attendance, and that makes it easier. I don't think that's what's going to stop this. And certainly the commissioners have the final say, but I think your recommendation is reasonable.
Chief, I think also, and I just thought of this, that in the examiners that are already Texas police officers that are reporting, that are going to apply for the certification, their training is already going to be listed in TCOL. Is that something that
Ideally, some of them will, some of them won't. Some of them it's going to show some weird title code in 400 hours, and we're going to have to figure out what it was. Ideally, they're all going to be the same. If they went to DPS, they're probably under one course number, and it's going to be easy to find all those. If they went to another training provider, how that got reported may or may not be consistent.
Yeah.
So
if it got reported at all.
That's what we have to sort through.
Okay.
But again, if you're willing to accept the APA or AAPP membership as proof alone, then that takes care of 85, 90% of them, right? And
Yes.
then if there's a few left and we got to go through and have them prove it, and we can do that. But I'd rather find the simpler route. It's simpler for them. It's simpler for us. Gets everybody on the same page much more quickly. And now all you have is the obligation of the continuing education requirements.
I'm good with it. Anything else to add to it? supposed to be. So I think we're at a point where we're just waiting to see what gets drafted.
We may have follow-up that we might have to do, and so if we could keep the subcommittees active,
Okay.
that would be great. And if we could have a subcommittee for the grandfathering issue, just in case if it comes up. It can be you can just assign one of the 4 subcommittees already to it as well, or you can create a new subcommittee for the grandfathering.
Does anybody want to volunteer? Okay. So the continuing ed.
You want to put in the continuing ed?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay.
Josh is back there. Dang it. Josh, everything good? Josh?
Sorry, I was looking through my T code to see what it was listed as the next one. What am I doing now?
You want to stay with continuing ed with?
Yes, that's fine. Yes.
David, you've been pretty quiet.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Maybe this will come up. How would we handle people licensed from other states? Would they just go ahead and come on in? How would that work?
What you've described, if they can prove APA or AAPP membership, then they would be able to get the certificate, and then they would be subject to the continuing education requirements.
Okay, got it.
And kind of generally speaking, as far as our other licenses, they have to, when they're showing proof, they have to show something along the lines of similar in scope, both the license and the training, in order to qualify for our out-of-state process here.
I do want to add, to let you to that, I know you said APA or APP. We do want to add that. We do have several law enforcement officers from other states surrounding that come to our training
Oh, okay.
that may want to partake in. So we would like to be included in that as well.
So would the out-of-state licensing be like an automatic reciprocity as long as they have the continuing our accreditation and like APA and everything?
Well, I think it's the same thing. They just
Yeah.
prove that they're members,
One of the
or they prove that they went through a school and have the training. Right?
Well, let's make sure we're talking about the same thing. So someone who lives and works in Louisiana, has a license there, comes and does some of their training here. They find out all I got to do is prove I have a membership and I can get a Texas certificate, right? And we award that certificate. But they're going to have to get a PID first. Someone's going to have to sponsor them, get the
Right.
PID,
Right.
and you have to report that training, get the certificate. Now they're going to have to create a mechanism for reporting their continuing education to maintain that. So if they come every year to Texas and do the conference, and then they do additional hours and report those, but they have to have a way to report those. If they're not associated with an agency here, that is going to be difficult unless they always go to Texas training providers to get their training so that it's being reported to us, if that makes sense. I don't think it's going to be a practical thing to be able to say I'm licensed in 2 states or licensed and certified in 2 different states, but.
So what we have currently is, because we're not a licensor, we'll have people go to Oklahoma and take the test just so that, like, do you currently do that? Yeah. So that
For example, I'm licensed in Louisiana because we don't have Texas licensing. So I actually went to Louisiana, went through that licensing process, and I'm a licensed polygraph examiner in Louisiana, even though I don't run any tests in Louisiana.
That way they can say they're licensed polygraph examiners.
Right, but I don't know that people licensed in another state are going to be certified in addition to being licensed in another state.
I think the only thing that might interest them is if they were to obtain a contract for an agency to perform services and they lived in a border state or
Right.
town on the other side of the line.
But then that state can, or I'm sorry, that agency that they're working for can help them get the PID number, right?
Yes, if they're associated with an agency, it gets simplified pretty quickly, so.
So I think we're good with that state. Yeah.
Can I ask a question when you say associated with an agency? So I do contract work, but I'm retired. So specifically, what did y'all mean by associated with an agency for a PID?
So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I don't know exactly what it will look like, but
Okay,
Agencies appoint licensed people. They also have the ability to add users to our system that work for them. So the most common one right now is we have some background investigation companies that contract with 5 agencies, and they will be assigned in their system as a non-licensed employee of that agency, which gives them certain access. And so in theory, if you work for 3 different agencies, all of them could make an assignment of you as a non-licensed person assigned to their agency, and then they attach responsibilities to that. We're going to do this with PIOs as well. So the sheriff
Okay.
and all 3 constables' office may use the same PIO. They'll all associate the same person with their agency and put them in that assignment. As soon as their certificate expires, I'm going to remove them from all 4 agencies, and I'm going to hold all 4 accountable for not fulfilling their obligation to have a PIO. Since they're not obligated to have a polygraph examiner, that won't happen with the agency. But we might remove you from that position if your certificate expires. They couldn't have you assigned as that anymore. They could still have you associated with the agency, but not assigned as a polygraph examiner.
okay, I just wasn't clear on that. Thank you.
Aaron, is there anything else you need to draft the language?
I have something if there's a minute.
Sure.
I appreciate what the reach of TCOL is on this. And it was my understanding that there would be a model policy for what examiners should be doing. And I had presented that up through our committee, and I didn't know if that would be something that the committee is ready to look at, which would be how do examiners actually do the business of doing a polygraph test? Because that's, we could get the certificate and then you could absolutely be running wild doing whatever you wanted to do that was contravening, best practices. And so is there going to be a best practice model policy?
That's, I think, something that the committee can consider if they want to create a model policy for the conduct of polygraph examinations by these certified individuals.
So just to make sure that the process, that wasn't named specifically in the statute.
No,
But I certainly think it's within the context of what we're talking about. And what will normally happen is when this group is done with their final work product, whatever it looks like, a rule change, the conditions of the certificate, and a model policy, those would all be presented to the commissioners, and then ultimately they make the decision what goes forward from there. So that's a component that they could take, and then they could just choose not to adopt it, or they could. The most important thing to understand with model policies is I can't hold people accountable for not following their model policies, right? So we have those in other situations, and the agents can say, yeah, that's what our policy says, but we're not doing it. The rule is going to have some things, right, that a licensee can't do those 2 types of interviews for an agency unless they have the certificate. I could discipline the licensee if they do it. I think I can prohibit a agency from using non-certified people for certain functions. Like I think there are some, but there are definitely things that they could do that I won't have jurisdiction over. A model policy would give you some reach there, but understand it's ultimately up to the agency to hold them accountable to the model policy, not to TCOL. That makes sense.
Yeah, I totally understand that. But in the and I think most agencies will do what best practices dictate, but in the absence of any best practice or model policy, then it's kind of the Wild West and we're back to where we were 40 years ago. So, we have submitted one up already that I would hope that someone would consider. Maybe there's a subcommittee that want to look at a model policy that we already have existing out there.
Mr. O'Burke, yeah, you can send that. I mean, as long as ethics and professional standards are covered within that model policy, I would say that would be something that every examiner should follow.
TJ, isn't there a TCOL mandate that agencies have to have a policy regarding polygraph examinations? Wasn't that?
Is it?
Is that on
No.
the list?
I don't think it's on the list.
It was the original, there was a bill that was proposed. It didn't pass.
But again, it doesn't have to be required by law. We have adopted some model policies by rule that weren't required by law. You can definitely propose that to the commissioners and they may choose to adopt it. One of the other benefits of doing that is that becomes where people get their information. So the best example for me is the hiring process. They changed 1701, 451 in the occupations code. They had clear requirements. Agencies weren't doing it. I didn't blame the background investigators. They don't read the occupations code. So I required a model policy and that policy says what the law says. And now they do it because it's in their own policy manual, right? So you could specify what their continuing ed training obligations are there, how they get the certificate. Some of those things could be in the policy, which makes it much more likely that those people who need it will have access to it. They're not having to go read my rule book or read the occupations code to find out. It's in their own policy manual at their agency. So you can kind of benefit two ways by adopting a model policy.
I know some agencies, not TCO obviously, but that I'm going to talk about maybe the sex offender realm of business when it comes to the state, the Sex Offender Management Board. When they want examiners to conduct examinations according to APA or AAPP model policies, it just reflects back to whatever their policy is. We expect you to follow their standards. And that way they don't have to rewrite it every time there's an edit to it.
So you're saying that model policies could be that simple?
It could be.
You're right.
And that, I mean, that's AAPP is that simple that they model it after APA.
Yeah.
So
So it's the levy models,
I think that's,
APA and all that. So
You'll probably figure it out by now, like the simpler, the better. Everything that we're able to reduce in this, the better it is.
So you don't have to rewrite it in 2 years.
No, but it's not just what we're doing, it's getting the commissioners to pass it, getting the agencies to adopt it and having it actually in the field, right? So if you come up with 1 or 2 pages, chances of success are 100 times higher than something that you come up with that's 20 pages. I mean, we know that's the reality. And if we can incorporate the continuing ed obligations and a few things in there in a very simple format, yes, it's in our rule book, but if it's in their policy manual at their agency, they're far more likely to follow it, understand it.
so for us, we have our own policy, plus we also have to follow both AAPP and APA. So we're pretty strict on our polygraph examiners.
If you work for the state, we'll make it 4 times as tough.
So I don't want to make it that difficult for an agency with one
Knowledge that you
examiner.
read the policy before you follow the policy.
So what is your time frame, Eric? Do you think?
Oh, how long will it take us?
I say 3 weeks.
At least, yeah.
Bobby, I think what the bill was amended to drop the final.
That's okay.
That's,
Where required, it's slaved to the APA standard. If there was a one section that didn't make it into the final engrossment.
I do too. Because we're down there, so much going on.
We'll call this. We're calling. That's what.
Do you want to have a subcommittee that works on a model policy or?
I think we're good if we just follow.
more simple.
Yeah, just APA and AAPP. I think we're fine.
I really would suggest that we at least have a subcommittee to at least talk about it. I would tell you both AAPP and APA are looking at some redrafts that have to do with several of the components that are there.
So that's the deal, Pat, is we don't want to have to re-meet about this every time they rewrite something.
I 100% agree. That's why I tried to write one that would never require that to occur unless it was something really dramatic. I would tell you a lot of it deals with approved techniques and who approved them and who didn't. And there's some confusing language in the APA's model policy about what you're supposed to do and not do. And in particular, how it relates to diagnostic opinions versus screening opinions and the ability to report the test results. I tried to simplify that in the draft that we've sent up that I believe the Major Dixon may have, but I would I would at least suggest that we have a committee to look at it.
Vote on it? How many people want it? Are we good with what we have?
Again, I understand what he's saying, and I love to create something that never has to be touched again going forward. But I think if we reflect back to APA and AAPP, just like we are for our continuing ed, just like we are for the initial training, I think if we continue to do that, and I think that we're in very good standing. And that'd be my recommendation.
You're all good with that? Yes, sir. You good with that, sir? Yeah. I think we're good with. Oh, does that need to be a motion?
No.
Oh, okay.
So we can come back with what that model policy would say.
And then, so
Next meeting.
I think Aaron's gonna draft up stuff and then we'll meet again. And if we need to, I think we need to see a draft of what we're gonna move forward with, right?
Mhm.
And then if there's more conversation that needs to be made, Pat, I think that's when we can make it.
I understand.
So back to you, Aaron. What's your time frame?
I think,
If we do the week of April 6th, then
6th is Easter, so.
let's not do it on the 6th.
13th?
before that's TBC.
Yeah, I can't do the week before, so the week after submission. So it'd either have to be, it'd have to be this 7th through 10th or the 20th through 24th. 20th.
I'm good with the 20th. Is everybody else good? No, you're not.
What month?
Of April.
Oh, April.
The whole week or?
How about?
Oh, are y'all good with Friday?
Fridays are good.
So 24th, that
The
morning.
24th of April.
David, you good with the 24th? Josh,
Yes, sir.
I saw your thumb up, Pat.
Yes, sir. I'm good with it.
We good with the 24th, Pat? Yes, sir. What time is good with y'all? I'm driving a whole 0.6 miles. I think it's very good.
You can walk it, huh?
Yeah, but I don't know about that.
Not in April.
Huh? Is 10 o'clock good with y'all? 10 o'clock good with y'all? David and Pat, Josh?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
10
sir.
o'clock's good.
You good with that, Brian?
I mean, it's not just dumping it on them. Like 10 a.m. April
There's
24th.
something else scheduled on that.
I'm on your calendar.
Is the, can you see if the room's available? Today, this one?
And if not, I can definitely get us a room.
We'll try to send a draft before, like the week before, so everybody can look at it.
Yeah.
Obviously, for the first time here. Just limit the discussion until we get to all in the room together.
We'll send it blind copy to everyone, so it won't be hopefully back and forth.
Is there anything else we need to discuss?
You think of anything? I don't think so. We may call we may ask some of the subcommittees to kind of come back to clarify any questions we may have, just so. And we'll work with the schedules and try and figure out a suitable time.
Thank you for being the draftee.
Yeah, no problem.
So you get paid the big bucks.
Mhm.
You have anything, Josh?
No, sir, I do not.
David?
No, nothing.
Pat?
I'm good. Thank you.
Aaron?
No, sir, nothing.
Pat, too? Ed?
No, sir.
You got anything? You got anything?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, that's it? All right, can I make a motion to adjourn? Oh, no, I'm sorry. We gotta, does anybody from the public have any comments? Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Whoever wants to.
Make a motion.
Second,
Third, fourth.
all in favor? Any opposed?
Thank y'all.
Think the motion passed.